Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Nicholas Chris. I'm a senior manager with T-Mobile's Cloud Center of Excellence, and I love to code. So I started coding in middle school. My first proper program was a Yahtzee game that I actually wrote out longhand on paper because I didn't have access to a computer at the time. And I'm telling you this because today T-Mobile's Cloud COE is primarily a software development shop. And so today what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about our journey getting from, gee whiz, you can create a instance in an AWS by using the AWS console, all the way through to proper software development and actually building platforms. So first, a little background on T-Mobile. We've been changing wireless for our customers, and the Un-carrier brand has really become synonymous with 100% customer commitment. We seek to change the game in wireless, and I think the results speak to themselves. 1.4 million net adds in Q1, and this marks the 20th quarter in a row that we've had more than 1 million new customers. Record low churn, which means our customers are satisfied, and the 17 quarters being rated by OpenSignal as the fastest LTE network. So starting in 2013 with tearing up contracts, going all the way now to most recently to giving our customers Netflix on us, Un-carrier moves are really known for eliminating industry pain points and delivering value to our customers. And the first Un-carrier move really kind of coincides from a timing point of view with T-Mobile's first earliest moves into the cloud. And in fact, cloud has been a key enabler of some of these Un-carrier moves. When we do these, we have to make these moves fast. And so the agility that you get on public cloud is really a critical factor. And just as we try to seek to disrupt an old industry with our Un-carrier strategy, the cloud team seeks to disrupt the old kind of enterprise IT model internally and replace it with a software development mentality and a desire to kind of approach things more as a startup. So first, kind of some background stories on why we even went to the cloud. I'm going to share with you 3 stories that are kind of, for us at the time, were eye-openers and kind of showed us that we were on the right track, that there was something to this. So starting in 2013, T-Mobile's, this was the very beginning of kind of the turnaround and the attempt to define what this Un-carrier strategy would be. At the time, our customer service website, my.tmobile.com, was ranked number 4 by J.D. Power for customer service. Now, 4 might sound like kind of decent until you count and you realize that of the top players, there's 4. So we were last. And so the idea was put forward that we should use cloud as kind of a proving point to see if we could not just refactor our sites and focus more like an intense focus on user experience, but could we change the development model from kind of the traditional waterfall telco-oriented way to a more agile-based iterative development? And so it became kind of the proof of concept for could this work? And this is an interesting one because the turnaround was great. In a period of about 6 months, we went from last on J.D. Power's survey to number 1, and we haven't relinquished that spot since. And it wasn't any one particular thing about cloud that enabled that. It wasn't magic cloud dust, but it was the fact that we used cloud as a reason and a catalyst for transformation. And a lot of other times, like if you're doing cloud right, you're fundamentally, this is in my opinion, you're fundamentally changing the way you attack all of your processes and the way you build stuff. As opposed to maybe the traditional kind of let's just lift and shift and run the same application in the cloud. And so we don't want to let those opportunities slide by. When we have an opportunity to take something to the cloud, we're looking to leverage every possible way in which we can improve that for the better. The next one, this is one of my favorite stories of cloud. So 2015, that was Super Bowl 49. And if you're a Seahawks fan, that's a very bitter one. We lost in the very last play of the game. It was also just a few months after we had launched Un-carrier 8. And that was a data stash move, which meant you could take your unused data and roll it over to the next month. And as part of that, we had some, I thought, pretty funny Kim Kardashian commercials. And for the Super Bowl, there was a promotion where you could log into our site, connect your Twitter account, and then Kim Kardashian would tweet you a personalized video tweet back. I can't remember exactly how personal it got, but this was a promotion that marketing had come up with. And usually on some of the bigger things, they keep it all very close to the vest. You don't find out, like as employees, we almost always find out about these cool promotions or these funny ads when the rest of our customers do. And so at 48 hours before the Super Bowl, the business came to us and said, we tried to do this with one of our vendors and it failed. They said they can't do it. What we're looking to do is to be able to handle X load, and can you guys pull it off? So we did our analysis and we determined that we would need about 5,000 video processing servers at peak, 100 or so Twitter feed processing servers in order to pull it off. And so our answer was yes, because we always say yes, and then we figure out how to do it later. And ultimately, we did it. We hacked together some fairly ugly, cruddy automation, had everything provisioned the night before, or hours before, if we're being honest, and it went off without a hitch. And then the beauty of it is most of the load was coming in the first 2 quarters, as you can imagine. And as we started to see the traffic die down, we just went ahead and enabled autoscale, and autoscale started to gracefully bring the servers back down. And the great story there is afterwards we did a retrospective, and we said, what would it have cost us to do this if we wanted to do it in the traditional data center model? And what came back, for context, it cost us from a hosting perspective, it cost us maybe about $150K all in to do everything. The analysis came back and it looked like it would cost us millions of dollars without getting to exactly how much, but it almost would have been impossible just because of the time frame. That's like T-Mobile very much has a culture of once a move is decided, that blood, sweat, and tears, we will not fail. I mean, on every Un-carrier move that we've ever done, we've never missed our deadline and postponed or anything. But we looked at this and said, no matter how hard we tried, we might not have been able to do it on that time frame if it wasn't for the cloud. The final one that I'll share now is in 2016. I was on this project from the beginning. And again, Un-carrier moves are kept, they're dark projects. You find out at the last possible moment, if not when the rest of our customers do. And we didn't have anything to do with Un-carrier at all at this point. We were just building the new version of T-Mobile's website. So the old one was an IaaS-based solution hosted in the data center. We had just kind of come out in a canary fashion with the cloud-based website. It was taking a tiny bit of traffic on a subset of pages, where there's a proxy in front that was deciding what went where. And so again, this was 2 days before the Un-carrier move is going to be announced. Marketing comes to us and says, we'd like to use the new website for the announcement and not the old website. Is that possible? So we said yes. Now let's go figure out how to do it. And again, in this case, we realized that for the scale that would be needed to support, we would need about 1,000 more instances than we had provisioned at the time. And there was one more kind of interesting caveat. They also told us, we said, okay, so can we get the content now so we can check it out and make sure it all works? No. Okay, when can we get the content? John Legere, CEO of T-Mobile, will be in Times Square live announcing this to everybody. When he starts talking, you can have the content. That was the answer. And we looked at it and we said, we can do that. And the reason we knew we could do that is because not only were we hoping to have the infrastructure as code piece done, but we had the CI/CD piece done. So we knew that we basically had what we call the big red button. You can push that button and everything from beginning to end would be deployed. And we tested that button. I think we tested it 5 or 6 times the night before, and we're confident that when it came time, it was going to work. That's kind of an inflection point for us, because that marks kind of the peak infrastructure as code point in our journey. That's the point where it wasn't just we had a lot of little red buttons in automation that worked in a lot of places saving us time. We had one flow that if you hit it you could go from what we call 0 to hero. So 0 is an empty VPC with absolutely nothing provisioned, to hero, which is your systems are up and accepting production requests. And so that inflection point's kind of in the middle of our journey there. You can see we kind of start from, I call him the happy monkey there on the left. He's for cloud, but he's happy. Gee whiz, this is so cool. You can actually provision a server in real time without doing an intake form and waiting 6 months from the data center. Individual pieces of automation here and there, a push to try to get as much automated and reduce our traditional operations, then to infra as code. And in infrastructure as code, there was another big push, which was to what we called self-service and federated administration. So that means, unlike the traditional mode where there's a team running your infrastructure, application teams would truly own their own stacks top to bottom. And when it came to administrating that stuff, the federated admin part means when you come to me as a new team, I say, who's your admin? And in our permission-based system, we attach them as an owner, and then they do all the team-based stuff. So you only have to kind of set up with me once as a team, not every time you need new permissions for things. And so at that point in time, we kind of were at the peak of the traditional infrastructure as code model. Feeling good, one of the happiest moments of my time in that time frame was when people would start asking me questions like, where's the cloud infrastructure team? I know there used to be an alias, but that alias isn't there anymore. And my answer was, because there's no such thing as a cloud infrastructure team. Well, who manages my infra? You do. And I always had a lot of fun explaining that to folks. Great, but still tended to run into lots of little things that were quite painful. So we have these systems that are all kind of similar in architecture, traditional multi-tier architectures provisioned on top of EC2, maybe some other Amazon services, and automation to stand it all up. But they were all different enough that you were never just perfectly reusing the same automation, the same infrastructure. And indeed, there were many times or several times where the same terrible, wasteful problem would bite us in the butt more than once. Without getting into details, there's times where there's literally the equivalent, the logical equivalent of a field in your proxy config that's like messed up equals true. And you have to remember that the last time you spent 30 hours figuring out that you need to go set messed up equals true back to false. And 3 other teams knew that, but you didn't know those teams, and you didn't know they went through those problems. And so we were fighting the same battles over and over again, and it really marked kind of the change in our outlook, where we were saying, okay, this was great, but we don't think that we just keep iterating on this to get better. And so we started thinking about building platforms. The idea was that if we have some hard-fought knowledge that we learned the hard way, let's build that into the platform so everybody else gets it by default. They don't have to go understand. And in fact, the driving force behind that is this big thing we call operational readiness, which is, okay, the devs went and built the stuff. There's now this laundry list of 50 things that have to be done: logging, monitoring, high availability, disaster recovery, that all have to be done before you're allowed to go to production. And we would do that over and over again every time, uniquely for each application. So we said instead, can we start building platforms where you get that for free, where the platform has been made operational already, and you just have to know how to host to that platform. And so really starting with, and I'll get into some of these details a little bit later, starting with platforms for containers and serverless, that was kind of the major shift into, okay, we're not mostly a governance and compliance and a ops shop that does a little software dev. We're now a software dev shop, and we are trying to put ourselves out of business in every other way. If I can implement all of my opinions as code, then I can stop talking about them in other places. I can stop uploading them to SharePoint docs and Excel spreadsheets where nobody will ever look at them. And so now that's kind of our high-level mission. We want to be a world-class software development org. And so what does that mean to me? One I just said, I tell my team all the time, if your opinion is important enough to talk about, or you want to talk to me about it, tell me how we're going to implement it as code, because otherwise it's going to get ignored. We build products. We don't do projects anymore. Traditionally, as a large company and as a telco, the background was very project-oriented, which is great. Everybody marches towards completion, but the idea of completion has always made me sad. It's never done. The thing should never be done. You should always be wanting to improve it. When we do build products, because now we're more product-oriented in our thinking, they'll earn their adoption. I never wanted to go in and get somebody to, like, some SVP to write a memo that says, you will use Nix software. That would just make me feel sad if you didn't use it willingly. And in fact, our customers, who are the software developers of T-Mobile that are doing those frontline applications, my goal is to delight them with the software that I make and have them want to use it. And so fundamentally, this is for us all about, instead of looking at ourselves and having other folks look at us as a telco that occasionally has some interesting technology. Instead, we're a tech company first. Hopefully in the mind, like we look up to folks like AWS and Expedia and these folks who have been on this journey. And we do tech. We happen to play mobile, happen to do some other cool stuff. We even do video, and we're one of the larger banks in the Northwest by virtue of our phone plans and stuff. All of it is driven first and foremost by great software development. And so we can talk a little bit about the platforms. I will kind of abbreviate and talk about a few of them in the interest of leaving some time for you guys to ask some questions. But we have platforms that try to advance forward our security. So we have an adaptive security framework, which is proactively looking for problems across dozens of accounts. T-Vault is a secrets management system based on top of HashiCorp Vault, but it makes it simpler for application developers to integrate. Pacman is policy as code management. And so again, opinions as code. Instead of writing a bunch of CIS policies or financial or cloud as a SharePoint doc that gets ignored, the canonical definition of a policy is the code. And it's checking it regularly in real time, and it's even able to, in certain cases, to automatically fix. Next Directory is formerly called Hyperdirectory. If you've seen us at reInvent last year or online, is a directory service based on blockchain, which the aim of today, it's a POC. We're going to go into production and cloud by the end of the year. The idea is to give you everything you have in a normal directory service, but eliminate the tens of thousands of hours in audits that a company like T-Mobile ends up doing for all our identity and access management systems. And then the two big, I'd call the application development and deployment platforms. Conductor does containers, and then Jazz Serverless orchestrates around all of the extra pieces you need in order to use things like Lambda, or even whether it's APIs or just plain standalone functions, or hosting a single page application in the cloud with S3 enables a bunch of that goodness around that. And so, we like to build this stuff as platforms. Every day I come into work, I'm excited. And I've had other people tell me this too, and it may sound ridiculously nerdy, but I've had weekends where Sunday night comes around and I'm like, oh, I kind of miss being at work. The opposite was always, oh man, it's Monday, I got to start the week again. Come in Monday morning and you're like, I'm so happy I get to work on this stuff again. And in fact, I kind of look at our role on cloud as having both a day job and a night job. Our day job is the care, feeding, and strategy of the cloud. But our night job is really engaging with the tech community in ways like we are right now, understanding where we should be moving next, working with folks who are as equally passionate about software development as we are, and getting that word out that we're a tech company, not just a telco. And so along with that, a key way that we do this innovation and we find these great folks, we kind of get that word out, is with open source. And so besides being a manager on COE, I'm the lead of the open source working group. And for us, first of all, several of the platforms that I just mentioned briefly earlier are open sourced already. So Jazz Serverless is open sourced. Next, in fact, was donated to the Hyperledger project, so we are now part of the Hyperledger Foundation's work. T-Vault is also open sourced, and Pacman will be open sourced later this year. And so we look at this work as both a way to not just consume leading cutting edge technology, but a way to, as producers, to influence the direction, and a way to have cool stuff for folks to work on so we get the best folks coming here. Every once in a while I have someone on a different team that maybe their stuff isn't quite so cutting edge, and then I'll paraphrase, but they'll be like, Nick, it's not fair. You get the best people because you have all the cool shit. Well, I say, well, then make your shit cool. If that's your complaint, right? So what we want to do is we want to make stuff that's exciting again. So people come in Monday morning amped up to work on stuff, and then we want to share it with the outside world so that we can find those great folks. And so if you're interested in learning more, you can talk to me. Like I said, I'm on the open source team. Definitely go to opensource.t-mobile.com, check out what's already there and see some of the videos. And if you're interested in this stuff, we'd love to talk to you guys. And so with that, I'll open it up for some questions and go from there. Oh, and I was told to tell you guys to go to the mic so that they get it on the video feed. Sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
I've heard a lot of companies want to move to the cloud to become fully automated, to remove their DevOps. Sometimes they are actually backing it, and other times it's just talk. What did T-Mobile do with their management chain or their culture to really make it happen and not just be an idea?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a fair statement there. And first, I would say we're still in the middle of our transformation. I don't want to make it sound like everything is perfect. And so I'd say we're in the middle, but kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. There has been both, I'd say, kind of the top-down traditional push of let's go define DevOps, let's send everybody to training, agile training, and kind of try to do the command and control. And I got to assume that's made a bunch of headway, especially probably a lot of that happened before I came aboard a couple of years ago. But the other direction is the bottom up. The bottom up is teams like us who just kind of socialize that here is another way to do it. And most of the time when we've done this, it's been through much more of a carrot than a stick. So for example, in this way, when we do the self-service, I talked about at infrastructure as code and self-service. Our point was, okay, you guys are going and doing these war room death marches every time. And every time I come and talk to you about it, you tell me you don't have time because you're on the next release. Like, skip that process for a while and just get that big red button done. And then you guys can all go to sleep at a normal hour. Or on the platform operational readiness thing, it really sells itself. When I say, oh, you can do things the way you used to, here's your 5-page list of things that have to be done, each of which is like multiple weeks' efforts for operational readiness and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Or you can use my platform, and the answer is it's done. It's done for you already. And so there's been both the top-down and the bottom-up. It's definitely not a complete deal. We have stuff that I still feel, okay, this is not right. We have separate teams doing builds and releases, and they call them the DevOps team. To me, that's not all the way to the finish line. But yeah.
Do we have time?
We have 5 minutes.
So for a company that is in the beginning of this journey of going to the clouds and DevOps, what would be that single most important thing, but sort of like a low-hanging fruit that they can start doing to get on the way? And what is the impact that they can expect to see from that?
Sure, yeah. So there is a low-hanging fruit way, which is, I guess what I would say for low-hanging fruit is it's not all or nothing. So pick not just smaller applications or one application, not all of them, but pick pieces of them. You can take an application and say, I'm going to break one little piece off, and I'm going to do that as a microservice, or I'm going to refactor it to take advantage of the reasons that you're on cloud. But now I'm going to kind of cheat or be snarky and say that if you want to learn from my experience, I'd say don't just go and try to do the low-hanging fruit from a technology perspective, because even though I have all this great story of that journey, I'd rather you guys not go through the 4 monkeys in the middle. You will be much better off if you just move straight forward to, and specifically, a focus on containers and serverless. And my pitch would be to make that easier and not so much of a world to have to understand all at once. look for platforms, especially my open source ones, to help accelerate you. Anybody else?
Fascinating to hear about the platform and how that comes together. Using one of the challenges you mentioned earlier, right? Only 3 other teams knew about, the secret setting, and yet you don't know. When you pull this into the platform, different teams likely would have some different requirements too, right? They need to know how to use this, and they also have just this one special thing for their project. So how do you pull that in without necessarily having this being a slowdown factor?
Yeah, you're right. That is an ongoing challenge. We still find those messed up equals true flags. When I'm not on a hot mic, though it's not the word messed up, but so yes, in fact, in particular, I would word it a little different, which is when we're building the platforms, we have to be constantly figuring out where we are on the opinionated spectrum. How opinionated are we about the platform, how you should do things versus completely open to set every knob and lever in which you want. And so first of all, we never build a platform in which the way you onboard is all or nothing, even at an application level. So for example, some folks come to us and at first they're like, we don't want to use Jazz serverless because we got this, and this that Jazz doesn't support. Our answer is you don't have to use it for your whole application. It's not even designed to be that way. If you have Lambda functions, you should be importing them into Jazz to make your Lambda world simpler. And if you're using Dynamo and today there's not a perspective on that, you don't need that to be in your world. On the other end of the spectrum, the container platform so Jazz itself actually is highly opinionated. We look at that and say that there are certain use cases that are just so perfect for serverless, and we understand exactly how and where you should use them, and we are in a much better position to tune those knobs. So come to us, and when a knob is set wrong, we'll figure out how to give you your flavor. The other end of the spectrum on the container space, it's more about, okay, here's an abstraction layer that allows us to do 99% of the orchestration we'd want to do while letting you have complete control over pretty much everything else in that space. And they have all the knobs and dials that they want. But there's a lot that falls out, and it's definitely not perfect. It's kind of a journey. Any other questions? All right, well, with that, I'll thank you guys.
Thank you, Nicholas. That was terrific. I thought it was also very interesting to, one of the things that I've said is that we use open source as our farm system, and that's how we found the best engineers I have ever found. I have found through open source, and the engineers I would have never found in any other way. And it sounds like you guys are taking the same approach.
Totally agree. And when our leadership came and asked us, okay, so you want to be a world-class development shop, what does that mean? And I said the shorthand for world-class development model is the open source development model.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So I think very interesting, and again, interesting to hear some of those the organizational challenges. I thought it was a terrific question around the tension around opinionated frameworks, and I've been opinionated, so you don't have to be, which sounds. Which can be great. It can also be like, well, actually, I disagree with your opinion, so we need to adjudicate that. And it's kind of that tension between allowing groups to have the freedom to innovate and the freedom to do the things that they want, and the freedom to be at the velocity they need to be, but at the same time, not repeating the same mistakes. So great morning sessions. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everyone. And I will see you back here at 2 o'clock for a lot more hybrid cloud. Thank you.